Oh, can you really consider it a commodity anymore if it's not being sold, like if nobody's paying for it? Because my understanding of commodity from like an economic definition or whatever is that it's produced for sale. And so if it's produced without like the actual consumers paying for it, can it be a commodity, or is there something else that we should be calling it?
Oh, I think this is why Christian Fuchs, he's a hardcore Marxist and he's off the hook, right? But this is why he's right about this, is he says, just like in factory labor, right? Who gets the money? Not the person who does the work, it's the person who owns the factory. So with this kind of work...
Paying for it, though. I mean, like, who's paying, like, as a user?
Oh, right. You're paying with your attention. So ads. That's how a lot of this is driven, right? So that's the piece that's missing from classical Marxism in some way, is that the currency has changed from money, capital, to attention capital, though also sometimes money, right? Because then something like MySpace can be sold for a lot of money. And what really chaps his ass, honestly, is that he feels like we're just being sold to each other. And that's really rude. Because at least in the past, we got shoes and cars, you know, albeit overly marketed, but still valuable objects. And now what we're getting is just crap, like crap that we make for each other. Cat falling off the bed, cat flushing the toilet, which I personally like. You know, it enriches my life quite a lot. I mean, I'm not kidding. One of the top 10 videos in YouTube is various cat flushing the toilet videos. And they're just remarkable, you know? I mean, you would never see that on the network, and HBO won't do it. It gives you a lot of pleasure to see it. But this is to say, like, that's very valuable. Cat flushing the toilet is worth a lot because people will watch it and they'll watch the ad. So this all adds to the kind of value of this Web 2.0 industry, which is the industry that everyone thinks is going to save us, right? Every other industry we've relied on in the past, like the car industry, the petroleum, not for us necessarily, but other kinds of manufacturing industries, everybody's in the financial industry, right? Those are not doing it right now. And so that's why I think there's all this investment in the digital native. Digital natives you put nothing into. You don't train them, they know how to do it. They're just born that way, right? Then they make a bunch of stuff that you can sell. I mean, that's perfect capitalism. But it's not really true. You know, my daughter's 8 and she can barely open it. I mean, if she forgets her password, she's totally lost with Neopets. You know, I mean, and I think that this mythology is attractive because everyone's wondering what's going to drive our economy, right? What's going to happen? Like, there has to be some way that we can all pull out of this without having to put anything in because we've got nothing. You know, public schools, no one's training kids to read or write, much less use the computer well, right? So I think this is a fantasy that absolutely serves a purpose. But it's not the fantasy of 10 years ago. You know, it's interesting. Generation D is not kids. It's totally adults. You know, the idea was that the digital industry would feed and clothe us and make us rich and continental, and they didn't do that. So there's got to be some other way for this fantasy to come true, and that's where I think these youth come in, and that's why the OLPC is just for them. I think that's part of it.
Hi, I just wanted to mention, did you know that the word Yankee actually translate, the original, what the word means is pirate, is
Really?
what I heard
I'm gonna write that
eventually.
down.
I was wondering that for years, and I heard somebody mention it like a year or two ago, I think on National Public Radio, you know. But that's what it means, and here we have the, you know, the word Yankee as if it means something good, and that's what I heard is what it means. So I'm not sure who named us. I'm not sure who gave that name to us, but we could take it from there.
That totally makes sense to me, though. It's part of the American identity as being transgressive but also cool, right? I mean, pirates are definitely cool, and that's why they're so attractive. You know, they're the bad boys of trade. You know, they're in these places that are interstitial places, the sea where you can't really regulate anybody, and that's just like the internet, right? It's that sea where no one can be totally regulated, and the rule of law is enforced very unevenly. Right? So that's why pirates are what the Swedes want to say they want to be. You know, they mean this in this kind of celebrating insurrectionist way of like, you know, we're not about the man, we're about something else. But once you become a political party, you are the man. Like, there's no way around that. So I'm just very curious, did you say how the pirate becomes this very differential term? You know, it's awesome to be a pirate and be a file sharer, but it's not awesome to be a gold farmer. Yet in some ways, you're creating much more value for people as a gold farmer than you are as a pirate. So.
Thank you. Like you, I was intrigued and bemused by Julian DeBell's article on the gold farmers, and I've been following the developments there. And what has struck me is really missing from the discussions of that whole subject has been a sense of history. And the fact that what's really going on, as I see it in World of Warcraft, is the activation in many ways of what Coco Fusco calls a colonial unconscious, that you can track right back to the, before the virtual gold rush, the historical gold rush, and, the history of lynchings of Chinese immigrants at that time. And of course, we should remind ourselves that what's taking place today is not just a virtual lynching, in the sort of digital environments of World of Warcraft, but this kind of violence is still being enacted on Chinese immigrants around the world today. I mean, not in virtual environments today. We talked briefly about this last fall, about the case in the UK of illegal immigrants working in the seafood industry. I'm not going to go into that now, but I have one question for you, and I just wonder what your thoughts are about this, because I know you're very attuned to questions of representation in the discourses around new media. And I had an interesting exchange with Julian DeBell about the use of the term farmer, which, as you, in the clip that you showed, it sort of says it all in terms of the awareness of a certain kind of, the term farmer is understood as a disparaging term. None of these terms are neutral. They all have certain kind of ideological implications to them. And so I was intrigued by how this term had become kind of normalized in itself, even though in the YouTube clip that you showed, the farmers are sort of saying, we don't like this term, basically. And Julian's response to me was, well, what you should understand is that this is not something that's specifically applied to this particular group, specifically, but that the term is a more generally used one within the gaming community to refer to this kind of activity. So what he's basically saying is like no offense intended.
Right, right.
And but still we have what we just saw in that clip. And I just wonder what your take is on this.
Right. It's true everybody farms, meaning everyone does repetitive stuff to get gold, which is why you can have a job doing it for someone else. But I think it's entirely about, as you say, you have to partly believe the people themselves when they say it's insulting and it feels bad to be called this. It's kind of like being a gardener on the weekend, getting home and garden, buying exotic plants, versus the experience sociologist Edward Bonilla Silva had when he was mowing his own lawn, and a neighbor said to him, "Will you do my lawn?" Because he's dark, he's a Brazilian, and she assumed he was the gardener, right? So she asked if he would do her lawn, and he said, "No, I'm not going to do your lawn. I'm your neighbor. I live next door to you." And she was entirely unfazed by this. She said, "Okay, if you have anyone to recommend, let me know." So I think that's what's happening there, right? Is that we all do things, but some of us are identified as those things. And that can be marginalizing, absolutely so. I think Bonilla Silva never got over that moment. That's why he put it in his book. Like, for him, that really is the crux of race in America, is that no matter what you are, in some ways, you'll always get questions like that. Can you do my lawn? Is that your baby? Stuff like that. My daughter is biracial, and people did ask me when I was younger, is that your baby? I think they thought I was a Filipino nanny, because that's a big status symbol in California. And I was always confused, as in, do you think I adopted a baby? But I think that happens quite a lot to biracial parents or parents of biracial children. So this is kind of about as you say, it's not just what the word means in a kind of etymological sense, but more what the semantics of it are in a given social occasion that make it a bad word or not a bad word. So.
In the same vein, I was wondering, in very general terms, in your research, if you found ways of stereotyping that is not, I mean, it seems that most of the examples that you are giving are examples of old racialized and stereotyped categories applied to a particular new environment in which they reinforce certain kinds of labor exploitation, for instance, so on and so forth. And my question is more in terms, is there such a thing, or have you found in your research a kind of stereotyping that plays maybe in the same way, but is related more to certain kinds of media practices rather than being sort of old stereotypes that are applied to new media practices? Yeah. The only thing that I can think, that I can think of, and I understand it's almost silly, but I'm thinking about terms like couch potatoes for TV viewers or geeks and so on and so forth, which are a sort of stereotyping related to media practices specifically. So I was wondering if in your research you find something like this.
I see that a lot more with gender. I think that geeks and tinkerers are almost always assumed to be men. And that's obviously a reality which is very harmful to women in the digital industries. You know, if you're a woman working in digital industries, people don't think you're a programmer, they think you're a designer or a project manager. So that's very much a formation that's old, but also kind of new, kind of about the digital industries themselves. I think gamers are still assumed to be men. There's a clip I'm not showing, which I took from the 40-Year-Old Virgin, which is one of my favorite movies, where a visitor is looking at the geeky, you know, pad, the geeky house of this character, and he says, "You've got to get everything out of here. You're going to have a woman over. You know, you've got all billion toys and more video games than an Asian teenager." So I think that's also part of the evolving mythology about gaming and racialization, is that there aren't women doing it, which there obviously are, and that Asians have this very vexed relation as both labor, but also the best consumers. You know, the worst consumers and the best consumers in a way. They're cheaters, but they also do the most legitimate consumption as well by buying every video game ever made. So I'm still trying to figure out how that works exactly. But I agree, like there are definitely kind of digital native to digital formations that are new, that are also stereotypes. I'm not exactly sure what all of them, I'm not sure of what a really good one is. But I think that's also something that takes time to happen. You know, that racial formation is actually kind of a slow process, and that maybe in a couple years we'll know what they are. But yeah.